Welcome to Data Leaders Podcast. I am Devabat, and this is where I sit down with top data thought leaders and extract really meaningful insights and actions that you can apply to your life and work to help you achieve your dreams and goals. This is where data and intuition meets decision making.
In today's podcast, we have Gaurav joining us.
Gaurav has been part of mission-critical teams at two San Francisco startups, LinkedIn SlideShare and Cloud. He previously co-founded This Yeah That, an online book portal for the Indian market, which won the Wharton Entrepreneurship VIP Seed Award and was the first non-US venture to receive entrepreneurial grant from Wharton's Innovation Fund. He was featured in Hindustan Times, Yahoo Finance, YourStory, and TechCircle. He is also a co-inventor of application-agnostic user search engine, and most recently he has been building Profillic, a product to fix candidate screening by applying machine learning to the problem of skill validation. He is finishing up his master's from Columbia University with a focus on computational linguistics and natural language processing, and he is also collaborating with the data services and machine learning team at Google Nest this summer.
An interesting fun fact about Gaurav is that he likes to turn off microwave at a perfect square number. Welcome to the show, Gaurav. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great as well. I'm here in Toronto at a SaaS entrepreneurship event, and it's going to be fun. But I'm glad we got a chance to catch up here with you. So, I heard a lot of great things about you, Gaurav. I was the first time I heard you speak was at Customer Acquisition Conference at GrowthX event. And just to bring our audience up to speed on the topic, you mentioned you were talking about how language plays such an important role in growing business. Can you bring our audience up to speed on what kind of role does language really play in helping growth? With business growth, with marketing growth, with growth hacking, and all of that good stuff.
Sure. So linguistics, which is what I study, is the study of human language and everything about it, structure, syntax, semantics, but the study of language, form, meaning, and in context. So speaking about products and services, the main two things you can change about, say, in the end user's direct interaction with your product is design and copy. Design, of course, is how things feel and look visually, virtually, tangibly to do whatever the product is designed to do. But copy is any sort of language text related to your product. If you read a website, email, product descriptions online or offline, Amazon, any ads, any sort of language, that is what copy is about. Now, Noam Chomsky, who is a professor at MIT, who also is very well known in the field of linguistics and psychology, talks about the intersection of linguistics and culture, how linguistics has an impact on psychology and how language influences the way people see the world, how it shapes the way they think, and by extension also what kind of things they use and see themselves with. Experiment Engine and a few other places have really good numbers on this. Where copy and design being the two things that people can test to grow their business besides the product itself. Design tests are used more often than copy tests, but in fact, the impact of copy-based tests is twice as much as design tests. So just changing words on your messaging and how you reach to people and how you brand yourself can have a huge impact. But people tend to underestimate the value of this. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. Just the value of copywriting and language and how you position yourself as a brand and your products and services for people.
Very cool. I did not know that most of the tests, copy outweigh design by at least twice. That's pretty awesome. A lot of people, rightfully so, pay a lot of attention to user experience, like you mentioned, and design. But we also have to realize that language is a critical part of that user experience, and triggering the right emotions at the right time can mean a lot of difference for different scenarios. So thanks for pointing it out. I really, I want to understand a little more since you brought up a couple of legends here, Noam Chomsky and linguistics and culture. What difference does it make when a brand decides to add a bit of scientific approach to creative language? Is there anything even like that? Taking a scientific approach towards creative language and copywriting, and what difference does it make?
Sure. So the most common examples that come to mind are things like when people, the products and services mention features as opposed to the benefits that something provides to people. Social proof is another thing where if someone sees that other people are using the same product, they're more likely to associate themselves with it. And going even deeper in terms of how specific words and specific phrasing can have an impact on how people view a brand and how much they're, say, even willing to pay for something. There's a really good piece of work by Daniel Jarofsky, who's a professor at Stanford in the field of natural language processing. His work on the language of food talks about how essentially even the same food in the same conditions, if you use certain words that sound fancier or sound more sophisticated and refined, people are willing to pay more because they see themselves and their personality is tied in better to those things, versus food that seems like it's fast food or made quickly, or it's just something that is more of convenience than a luxury item. Those are some of the examples that definitely come to mind. The other aspect of having a scientific approach to the copy use is if you're not exactly measuring or going about it in a testing approach, you're just basically trying different things and hoping something works or something sticks, which is commonly known as a spray and pray approach. So essentially, you can't improve what you can't measure. So adding in a basic level of scientific approach or A/B testing done effectively can make you see what words resonate well, what kind of phrasing and what kind of messaging works well with the people, the target audience you're trying to sell to.
Yeah, that's a great reference there, Dan Jarofsky. I'm going to check out his book that you're referring to, or his course. One thing that comes to mind, Gaurav, is the whole taking this more scientific approach towards copywriting, and I'm wondering if you're aware of any products or services that actually taking this whole natural language processing field and applying that to their copywriting and doing it very well. Are you aware of any companies or products that are doing that?
Sure. So there are plenty of companies that are doing that, and we'll definitely talk about them. However, the things that stick out the most are not, say, super technical, or you wouldn't even imagine, are two such examples. One was, in fact, Obama's 2012 campaign, where they used a scientific approach to the wording in the campaign messages and emails. They tried two versions where, for unsubscription from their emails, one just simply said unsubscribe at the bottom of the email, and one said if you'd like to unsubscribe from these messages, click here. The added length of sentence and the cognitive overhead in persons reading the sentence and making sure that they know what they're doing before they click through basically yielded them a 20% drop in unsubscribes, which is not insignificant. That's a decent number. The other big one was a study that people ran on the donation process of the American Cancer Society. And one of their wordings was simply, would you be willing to help by giving the donation? And the other, which they were testing in this, the test, was they added at the end of the sentence, every penny will help. And they saw that given when people add minimal parameters to kind of such some phrasing that people are reading, they saw up to 2x improvement in people actually donating. It's just because this all boils down to essentially the same thing, which is they reduce the cognitive overhead on people's minds. They didn't have to think, how much should I donate that's a decent amount, or whether my name will be associated to it, or things like that. They saw that even a single penny will help. That reduces their thought process and makes it easier to do easier to get out of information paralysis and take an actual step forward.
I love it. The reduction of cognitive load results in reduction of unsubscribes. That's good stuff right there. A lot of times those little things towards the end of the email make a lot of difference. And thanks for sharing that. So
absolutely, often not intuitive for sure.
Yeah. Anything? The thing that I want to go back to is your background, which is you have a pretty good technical background, but you also understand human psychology and the whole behavioral psychology aspect of the marketing, which brings me to my next question, which is the background that you have with computational linguistics and natural language processing. How do you apply that beyond your traditional copywriting skills that you already possess? How do you apply that towards growth hacking?
Sure. So the main thing to keep in mind here is you're trying to develop user empathy, as in you're trying to see how the target audience that you're trying to get to, the people who use whatever you're selling, how they talk, how they see themselves, and how they are likely to use a product in the way you position themselves. The technical tools that are often used for this, given that I come from a technical background, are one, Python is really useful, both for generally coding stuff as well as for web scrapers, as in getting data, textual data from, say, blog posts or just the internet, different variety of sources. And they have really good libraries, the famous one being Stanford's NLTK, the Natural Language Toolkit, which is in Python, but varieties are available in different languages as well. There is Word2Vec, which is a huge data set of word embeddings, which is what kind of words are related to each other, synonyms and similar words. You can do all sorts of word algebra, like king minus man plus woman will give you queen. This sort of interesting math stuff, or say scientific stuff, if you will, with language directly. And then famous sets of data that give you information specifically in English documents are the Brown corpus and Penn Treebank datasets. They have done a lot of textual mining on a variety of sources and actually done a lot of the heavy lifting for people, where they have word embeddings, they have part of speech embeddings, just so you can understand textual data way better than if you were to manually start up today. Now, if you use these tool sets, if you want to understand your users, some things could be as interesting as looking at social data. Say what people are talking about your competitors, the good points, the bad points, how people view the general space. Look at Twitter data, look at data from Amazon book reviews, look at data from Stephen Cora, and then mine those to see what kind of keywords, what kind of topics occur most commonly, which one of those have a positive sentiment versus negative sentiment, and which one of those are most unique and often not used by your brand's messaging. That'd be a clever way to hone in on what people are trying to say, what people like, and also things that your brands are not noticing, especially if they're not as data-driven as you're trying to be. So word cloud analysis of competitive analysis of landscape, and also trying to see where you want to put your brand personality. So there are main 5 dimensions of brand personality, which are sincerity, excitement, competence, sophistication, and ruggedness. To say GoPro would lie in excitement and ruggedness. Uber would lie in competence and sophistication. You want to analyze, based on these also, how your end users see themselves, how you can classify them in these categories, and what kind of wording you want to use that overlaps the most with these as well. So boiling down to user empathy, what makes it most likely for the end users to see themselves in you and mentally associate themselves with your product? That improves kind of your whole business strategy.
Wow. So I'm very curious about the 5 brand personality, 5 dimensions of brand personality. the sincerity, excitement, competence, sophistication, and ruggedness. Where, is there a reference to where we
Sure.
can find more of this, or where we can learn more about this?
Sure. So this was actually a paper by Jennifer Acker, I believe a professor at Stanford. It was in the late 90s or so, and they were talking about how you can humanize brands and show brands as a human personality, and then do lots of intelligent marketing around that, as opposed to people not having any idea about what a brand is. But it all boils down to, like I said, user empathy. If people can kind of humanize your brand even, they're more likely to see it. It's usually emotions that get generated in people when they look at your product, and then they rationalize the product decision as opposed to the other way around. If something makes your people feel happy or love using your product, they will rationalize paying for your product or using it more often than if there's something else that may do the job better but doesn't make them feel a good way. You're going to outperform them.
Mm. Yeah, that's very interesting. Even I've heard that sometime in the past, where people tend to use emotions to make decisions and then rationalize it using logic.
Exactly.
And if you understand those emotions, you can easily help them make those decisions using using this technology. So very powerful stuff here. Do you know if any brands or products are actually doing this kind of reverse engineering of emotions?
Sure. So some examples would be Airbnb is a really good example. They started out as kind of being competitor to Craigslist home and rental listings, but gradually they started to position themselves as a friendly home away from home. They're disrupting hospitality and lodging, but they talk about how Airbnb is a way to book homes from local people and experience the place like you live there. That kind of puts a whole human touch to, would you want to just get a place from Craigslist or hotels, where in fact, instead you could travel and experience a nice place and live like local people there. Another one, as a good example, is Text.io, which does something really interesting, where they do a lot of NLP analysis and are able to look at your job listings and show you what might be wrong, or what key phrases you can change around that can work well, or what kind of words and stuff add bias. So, for example, if you have certain words where typically you say some tech startups, people tend to say we're looking for rock star, ninja, or killer kind of coders, that tends to attract only, say, male coders of a certain variety. Whereas if you want a more diverse pool and people who are still a little more mature, you might want to be careful about how you're positioning yourselves to prospective job candidates. Another one that I use personally a lot for keeping notes of everything is Evernote. And I noticed how to do A/B testing on what kind of messaging they have on their landing page. One is just inspiration strikes everywhere, and Evernote lets you capture, nurture, share ideas across any device. And the other is modern life can be complicated, simplify for Evernote. That is interesting to see that even the company at this stage actively A/B tests and sees what kind of things to focus more on and how people see themselves using Evernote. Is it more about the fact that they want to have mobility and store stuff everywhere, whether they're on the go or just sitting at a desktop? Or is it more just about Evernote being an organizational kind of tool and managing notes efficiently? Personal example that is very relevant to the concept of understanding end users as a tool is Lithium. They actually have a service where they actually work on the background with stuff like consumer forums, say for Sephora, for Microsoft, for Verizon, all those big companies, they're multinationals. What kind of stuff are people saying about them on the internet? What kind of stuff are people saying about them on their own forums or other forums? And what kind of keywords and topics are trending? What kind of analysis can you do to see what things might be bubbling up or becoming bigger issues, or how do people feel about the brand? And these are really powerful things to understand and are made possible only through computational linguistics NLP.
Wow, those are some great examples. I'm definitely going to give it another listen. Thanks for sharing all those awesome examples, Gaurav. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I'm curious about, you got a lot of things going on in your life, but are you passionate about any personal projects at this time? Are you working on anything exciting that you want to share with us?
Sure. So I have been working on the side on Profillic. The idea boils down to how the current hiring process, and more specifically candidate screening, still has a lot of human biases in play. To a large extent, it's often people looking at resumes and looking at proxies for how a person will do on the job. So they look at their GPA, schools, brand names, people you worked with, and subconsciously even your actual names, which is a study done by Harvard saying that certain kinds of names with exactly the same resume, if you change the name, the performance varies, which is extremely odd, which means that since we're humans, there's a lot of subconscious bias that goes on in us looking at something that's a subjective piece of paper like resume. The other aspect is, say you and I work on we have the same kind of skill set. If someone's looking at a resume or a piece of paper and text on it to kind of gauge who is a better fit for the job, you're actually just optimizing for who writes a better resume than who actually has a better skill. Right? So if I write something like, I have a lot of experience in this and write it really well, whereas you're not able to portray it yourself as well, but you're a really good coder, I might have the upper hand in getting in, and you might be incorrectly filtered out. So a lot of false positives, false negatives, based on people's biases on such textual data. The way I'm trying to solve this is to be, one, kind of like a blind analysis, so not look at people's names, put the resume aside, and then directly do data modeling of their performance on a short kind of quiz and see through a bunch of data points how well it maps out to the ideal job candidate. This is still in the very early stages, but a lot of companies have showed interest because it kind of gets around the whole aspect of people from not top-tier schools or not from good backgrounds tend to be biased against, seeing if they're really well at what they do. This also ties into, like we just talked about earlier, job descriptions, what kind of words you use, how even computer science is portrayed to people in terms of, say, learning a technical skill set versus what kind of impact you have. When you talk about technology, when you talk about what kind of things you can do, like databases, operating systems, web development, that tends to attract more of a male crowd. Whereas when you talk about, hey, you can use computer science to, say, make cool stuff and have an impact on society, or understand, say, how traffic works and all that kind of stuff like that, that tends to attract a more diverse crowd. So there's some interesting things I'm working on the side, but all sort of ties into this whole thing of how language and psychology kind of ties together in a very interesting manner.
Wow, that sounds like a product that could definitely be used by every organization that wants to recruit anybody. That could be huge. I'm looking forward to the evolution of it.
Absolutely. It is a very powerful thing to do. So I'm very excited to work on it and hopefully putting it out in the hands of a few people in the next couple months. Keep you posted for sure.
Yeah, man. Yeah, totally. I want to hear more about it. One thing I always do with my guests, Gaurav, is I ask them this round of rapid fire questions, which is my favorite part of the whole podcast, which is, asking you some questions off the cuff and you'll answer them. So here we go. I'm going to ask my very first question. If you could put a data science related billboard anywhere with anything on it, where would it be and what would it say?
Sure. So this would be in downtown San Francisco, because this is a mecca of tech startups, as you probably know. And I would put it to say the plural of anecdotes is not data. Now, to elaborate, it would be around the concept of confirmation bias. People tend to make statistics say whatever they already kind of have been thinking all along. And that's a very big problem to avoid. Like you can massage numbers to say whatever you want to say, but data science is nothing without enough good data. There's garbage in, garbage out. So to put it succinctly, the plural of anecdote is not data.
Wow, that's amazing. I love it. Second question is, what's a data or decision related product that you have purchased in the last 6 months that was under $100 but had a huge impact on your life? The product would have something to do with either data or decision making.
Cool. So since I'm a lot into NLP and working with stuff, I was recently checking out neural networks, which are a lot more powerful than, say, traditional machine learning, just for the sheer amount of analysis you can do. And it was an actual physical copy of the speech and language processing book by Dan Jarofsky, and also about $30 of AWS credits to work with graphical processing units that are really powerful for running things like TensorFlow. That was my significant purchase in the last 6 months to let me do a lot of powerful stuff in NLP.
Nice. Always like the answer to those questions. It's always unique for everyone. So thanks for sharing that, Gaurav. When you think of a data person being successful, who's the first person that comes to mind? And if I may ask, why?
Sure. So Andrew Chen, who's currently working on growth at Uber, essentially coined the term growth hacking and said that growth hacker is the new VP of marketing. And he talks about the very technical approach of how you market and grow products at the intersection of engineering and marketing. And he currently advises startups like Dropbox, Product Hunt, and AngelList as well. And he's one of the best people in growth marketing, growth hacking in Silicon Valley.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I've definitely heard of him, and I'm looking forward to explore more. Now that you recommend him. One other question I have is, what's a good data related book that you often go back to the most?
Sure. So for me, it would be a tie between two. These are very strong fundamental books and explain everything in great detail. On the machine learning side and data science side is Pattern Recognition and Machine Learning by Christopher Bishop. And on the computational linguistics side and understanding of language and the intersection with data is Speech and Language Processing by Daniel Jarofsky and James Martin. Dan Jarofsky is the same person from Stanford who talked about the language of food, in case you remember. But really cool stuff. It's a favorite two books to refer to. And in case you are working with Python and natural language processing there, a book that might be good for you is Natural Language Processing with Python, Analyzing Text with the Natural Language Toolkit. Explains everything in great detail, very simply, and helps anyone get started with NLP in Python.
Yeah, I'll check them out. I have definitely heard a few of them, so looking forward to learn more about it. This is great. Thanks for sharing that, Gaurav.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And my final question, this is my favorite question, which is, you kind of referred to it earlier, which is, which story do you use most often when communicating with C-suite about data science?
Sure. So I had the good fortune of working with people, especially in Silicon Valley, who understand the importance of data science and are pretty data driven. However, just in general, it is good to remind people that the bottom line is the impact on business, right? If you're able to understand the people using the product or service, that is what underscores and drives the company's numbers. So for competitive advantage, efficiency of business processes, and everything in general, instead of shooting in the dark and using a spray and pray strategy, you want to be able to measure things and improve them. You cannot improve what you cannot measure, and the way to make smart decisions is only through data science.
Very cool. Very cool. So I'm so glad we had a chance to chat today. And, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people wanting to reach out to you and connect with you. Is there anything you can share with the audience on how to connect with you? Or I'll be sharing that in the blog post at dataleaders.io. Is that a good medium to reach you?
Yeah, sure. I'm pretty social savvy, so it's totally fine to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter, Facebook. I'm pretty good about that. What's your work?
Great, awesome. Well, I'll share those links in the blog post, and I'm sure a lot of people will want to reach out to you after that. So thanks so much for being on the show, Gaurav. I'm really glad we had a chance to connect and talk about some of your passions and where some of my passions intersect. So thank you so much once again, and looking forward to catch up with you once you have an update on Profillic.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. It's always a pleasure talking about this stuff. Thanks again, man.
Yeah, we'll catch up soon.